Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 10 performers who surpassed the composer's own recordings. A couple of you had mentioned that I should do something like this after I'd already put it together, so it means we were all thinking along the same lines. Great minds think alike, right? Actually, it's a very interesting topic because, performers, in my opinion, seldom offer the last word on their works. And that's a good thing, a very good thing, because if they did, there would be no reason for anyone else to play them and no reason for anyone to listen to anybody else. And it would mean that the works themselves have some sort of limitation. I mean, it's really an interesting question in aesthetics, because quite often a piece of music contains far more, or at least far different or other, than the composer himself even imagined. Mahler was very good about that idea, in telling his interpreters that if something didn't sound right, they had an obligation to change it. And when he went to the Concertgebouw, where Mengelberg was conducting, and they were quite close, they gave a concert of Mahler's Fourth Symphony twice, where Mahler played it and then Mengelberg played it with Mahler in the audience, which is really kind of a cool thing to be able to do when you have a composer of that, at that level, and great interpreters. So I don't think any of these composers would really mind if the interpretation were superior to anything that they could do. I think that would be considered healthy. And of course, most composers understand the limitations of their own time and write music which they hope will transcend them. And sometimes it does. So here we have some opportunities to really get into that. So let's begin at the beginning. We have the list of 10 with the interpreter, the artist, and then the composer whose work is superseded. And that's the list down below that you can have a look at. So we begin with Leonard Bernstein and Aaron Copland. Now, Copland knew Bernstein was a great Copland conductor. He had no problem with that. It didn't stop him from setting down his own thoughts on how his music ought to go. But there are only a couple really fine Copland recordings, whereas Bernstein did amazing Copland, especially the Third Symphony. And he actually had a hand in Copland editing the coda of that symphony to make it a little bit less, well, shall we say, obvious. And he was right, by the way. He was absolutely right. So Bernstein's Copland is really better on the whole than Copland's Copland. The only exceptions are the Boston Symphony Appalachian Spring and the complete Appalachian Spring in its chamber version that Copland did with a small pickup ensemble. Everything else, you're better off if they both did it, if you get Bernstein's recording of it. They're just jazzier and more dynamic and more rhythmic and more cogent and better. What can we say? Next, George Szell and William Walton. Now, Szell championed Walton's music for his entire career, and Walton was incredibly grateful. Walton was desperate to have Szell perform his newest works, even though he recorded a lot of them. Walton was a pretty indifferent conductor of his own music. He was a notorious perfectionist. He wrote very slowly. His scores are extraordinarily detailed, and he didn't really have the ability to bring out that level of detail in the ensemble, especially the English orchestras of the day in the 1950s and early 60s, where they were really nothing special, except for the new Philharmonia. I mean, the Philharmonia, which was new. The new Philharmonia came later, but essentially, the recordings that he made are, but Szell stuff, my God, it's some of the greatest recordings ever made of anything, including the Second Symphony, the Intimate Variations, the Partita, and a couple other shorter works. It's a pity he wasn't able to do more, because he was absolutely astonishing. I would have loved to have heard him do the First Symphony. Anyway, go for George Szell. He's obviously the best, and Walton knew it. And was freely admitted it. Let's put it that way. Next, Antoni Witt, fabulous Polish conductor who is incredible doing large choral works. And Krzysztof Penderecki. Penderecki, again, was a very competent conductor of his own music, although he could be a little bit heavy-handed and metronomical. I saw him conduct several of his works, and they were good. They were really good, but Vit's in another league. Oh my goodness. In fact, I have a pile of it sitting right here. Hang on a second. I mean, you have to keep your Pendereckis right here. Oh, here they are. Oh my. Oh my. Like there's a whole ton of it. We've got the St. Luke Passion. We've got the violin concertos with Konstanty Kulka, who's really good, by the way, Chi Yun. We've got symphonies, all kinds of symphonies, and the Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima, the Dies Irae, and the Psalms of David. Those avant-garde things, too. They're just fabulous. I mean, it's great stuff. So we can put that away. And there's more here, too, actually. Oh, Lord. Yes, there's more. The Seven Gates of Jerusalem, which I saw Penderecki conduct when we gave him an award at the Con Classical Awards. He came and his wife, Elżbieta Penderecka, had all of Poland show up to perform that work, and it was fun. This is such a hot performance. And a Polish Requiem. Great stuff. Just great stuff. And Vit is incomparable. And he's on Naxos, which means it's not so hard to find. It's not too difficult to find. And you can hear for yourself just how tremendous a conductor he is. Then we've got Marin, Alsop, and Leonard Bernstein. Turnabout is fair play, Lenny. Of course, Bernstein was a fabulous conductor of his own music. He really was, and he did it multiple times. But Alsop studied under him and obviously has an extraordinary feeling for it. Her recording of Mass is unbelievable. It's just the best thing out there. Much better than Lenny's own in a lot of different ways. I mean, it's really extraordinary how well Bernstein's music has held up in the hands of others. She does a Slammin' Jeremiah symphony. Her the concerted works, yes, the Serenade and other things are just gorgeous. If she isn't better in everything that Bernstein did, she's as good. I mean, there is nowhere where she's in any way inferior, and that's saying a lot. Her Bernstein box, again, it's on Naxos, is really something special. I have it sitting right over there. I keep it handy, just like I keep Antoni Vit's Penderecki handy, because you should always have it at your fingertips. Then we've got, Boris Giltberg doing Shostakovich piano concertos. Boy, all these people seem to be on Naxos. A whole bunch of them are, anyway. Giltberg is just a terrific pianist. He doesn't seem to be getting as much attention as some of the other sort of, young guns running around of the Russian school or whatever, but he did the two Shostakovich piano concertos on Naxos, so they're as good as anybody's and better than Shostakovich's. But then again, everybody's always sort of acknowledged the fact that Shostakovich was a little bit neurotic and brittle, I think is the word, in his interpretations of his own music. He was a very fine pianist, but he was never a concert pianist. He did start out as a cinema pianist, playing piano in silent film auditoria when he was in conservatory and whatnot. He certainly had the chops, but on the whole, he was better when writing for others, and even in his piano works. And although he recorded some of them, you can hear them done better by any number of soloists. And I selected Giltberg because I just don't think he gets the attention that he deserves. He's a really, really fine pianist, and give those a shot. You'll be quite pleasantly surprised. Then we've got Colin Davis and Michael Tippett. Now, I know a lot of you probably are not running around saying, who is the world's greatest Tippett conductor? But this is one of those examples, along with Vit and Penderecki and Szell and Walton, where it shows you just how fruitful it is and how much composers need to have brilliant interpreters supporting their work. Because Davis's Tippett recordings are wonderful. I mean, the Midsummer Marriage is glorious. The first symphony was, the second symphony, the first two symphonies actually were spectacular. The Suite for the Birthday of Prince Charles was lovely. The Triple Concerto was wonderful. I mean, and the other operas that Davis did too, which are kind of weirder as they go, they get stranger. But his advocacy was always passionate and always intensive and really loving. And Tippett was very, very lucky to have him, and he knew it. He knew it very, very well, because I was there. I saw them work together, when Tippett premiered The Mask of Time in Boston, he invited me up. I'd written him a letter about how much I loved The Midsummer Marriage. He said, "Oh, well, we're doing the Mask of Time. Why don't you come and hang out with us while we do it?" So I was like, okay. I was at Stanford at the time in grad school, and I flew across country to make that appointment. I wasn't going to miss that. We had a lovely lunch, and with Davis and Tippett and Myron Bowen, his friend guy, and it really was incredible fun. I gave him my grandmother's cabbage soup recipe, which is amazing, by the way, because he ordered cabbage soup from the hotel restaurant. It was disgusting. Anyway, my point is that there was genuine empathy between them, and they talked about how they were going to do the work, and it really was wonderful to see. And it really drove home the importance of having first-class interpreters, especially of new music, and especially The Mask of Time, which has possibly the most unresonant line of text anyone ever inserted into a vocal work in the history of the human throat. That line of text is, you ready? Quote, "What's it all about?" asked the dainty lacewing, her mandibles wet with the juice excreted by her own ovipositor. Unquote. I'm not kidding. And of course, Tippett, being Tippett, gets the stress all wrong anyway. Her mandibles wet with the juice excreted by her ovipositor. I mean, it was like, oy, 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 my God. But Davis conducted it beautifully. The Mask of Time has amazing things in it, along with some stuff that, like everything Tippett wrote, makes you want to just cringe. So there you go. Then we've got, Esa-Pekka, Salonen, and Lutoslawski. This is very interesting because, Salonen is a considerable composer in his own right. Lutoslawski was a fine conductor of his own music, and he did a big series of, he recorded it many times, but principally with the Berlin Philharmonic on Philips. I always found those recordings to be somewhat pale, lacking a little bit in color and impact and texture. And everything that those recordings miss, Salonen provides in abundance, especially the Third Symphony, with that da-da-dum, those four-note repeated chord things followed by that sort of aleatoric woodwind squealy bitties. And it's just marvelous to hear Salonen do it, and a little bit snoozy to hear Lutoslawski conduct it. Not that it's bad, not that he didn't know how it went, but it makes a big difference when you've got a real pro who does this for a living, working on realizing all of the inherent color and texture and expressive half tints. Yeah. So Salonen is just wonderful, Lutoslawski, and of course he's a contemporary music specialist. So there you go. Marc-André Hamelin. Hamelin playing Frederic Rzewski. Oh, that's so much fun. The people united will never be defeated. Rzewski recorded it multiple times, at least twice that I can think of, maybe more. And Hamelin is just incredible. He even out-Rzewski's Rzewski in the improvisational part at the end. At the very end of it. Hamelin is really, really special, as we know. And when he plays these incredibly difficult, complex works and makes them sound just effortless, he just loses himself in the music. And, and there it is, out there for all of us. Really, really exceptional. And it's, of course, wonderful to be able to compare these versions to the composer's own. And Rzewski was one hell of a pianist and performer of his own music. So that's another very, very instructive and instrumental comparison, not least because a lot of pianists played the work. The dedicatee Ursula Oppens in her second recording was also exceptional, absolutely exceptional, and at least as good, if not better, than Rzewski himself. So that's like a major thing. And then we've got, this is a really interesting one to me, Karel, Ančerl, and Stravinsky. Stravinsky was not a great conductor of his own music. He wasn't. He was okay in some of it. And his best disc is probably the one containing the symphonies in C and the symphony in three movements. And the Symphony of Psalms, I think, is on the disc too, on CD anyway. And he showed us one way that the tempos could go, because his own tempos changed over time, not unexpectedly, but I think Ančerl is amazing because he gets to the heart of Stravinsky's Slavic/Russian roots. If you listen to the early ballets under Ančerl, you hear all of the rhythmic attack and brilliance that Stravinsky wrote into them, all the radical qualities. But because it's the Czech Philharmonic as well, let's not deny them their credit. There's a folk-like earthiness, a Russian quality to the music that Stravinsky's own recordings totally lacked. I mean, completely didn't have a shred of sort of, ethnic feeling in his music, but it's there. It's absolutely there. And so for that element particularly, I think Ančerl was an amazing Stravinsky conductor, and he did the late works particularly well. I mean, he did Oedipus Rex, he did the Symphony of Psalms, which is the reference recording for that work. And then he did the cantata and some of the other, sort of stranger later neoclassical things, and they were all first class. Absolutely first class. He was a genius conductor, and he responded to something in Stravinsky that was really, in a really profound way. And it's amazing that, at that time in the Czech Republic particularly, that he was permitted to make so many Stravinsky recordings. So, beggars can't be choosers. And last but not least, and this one may also be a little controversial, Zoltán, Kocsis, and Rachmaninoff. Yeah, Rachmaninoff himself. Now, we all know that Rachmaninoff was one of the great pianist composers in the first half of the 20th century, and his recordings of his own works are fantastic. I mean, they're dim sonically. They were recorded in the 30s and 20s and 40s or whatever. So they don't sound that good, but boy, could he play the piano. And Rachmaninoff's piano writing was written for Rachmaninoff because he had huge hands and he was left-handed. So, it's wonderful to hear him play his own music. But when Kocsis did those Rachmaninoff concertos and the Paganini Rhapsody with Edo de Wart and the San Francisco Symphony on Phillips, they were as close as it was possible to get to Rachmaninoff's own recordings, totally devoid of spurious, excessive heaviness and quicksilver and mercurial and just brilliant and with the slow movements had such poignancy and expressive depth, but without any kind of schmaltz. And it's funny because, composers often play their music that way, especially composers of a more romantic bent. They tend to be swift and somewhat less emotional than other performances. But Rachmaninoff built so much into it anyway. And you really get the sense in hearing the second and third piano concertos, particularly and the Paganini Rhapsody, that they are so well integrated, works for the orchestra and the piano on an equal basis for a true composer-pianist. And Kocsis, who was also himself a composer-pianist, really gets it. I mean, he really gets that element in a fabulous way. And these are sonically splendid and at least as fine, and I think better, than Rachmaninoff's own performances. So there you have it. 10 examples of how performers can reveal depths to a composer's work that the composer himself might not have suspected. Very, very interesting question, and it's wonderful to have the opportunity to compare the works of the creators with those of the performers and see who comes out on top. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.